So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Julie Lockman. I'm pleased to welcome you to our 2016 kickoff of our Clinical and Translational Research Seminar Series hosted by the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute. And we're really excited about our topic today on mentoring, as this applies to pretty much everyone within these walls and outside. And so we have some great information to share with you today. We also have people at our partner sites who are on the screen here. We have people, individuals at the Osteopathic Medical School, so hello, and in Charleston joining us. Basically, I just want to make sure you all do understand the CTSI does have a strong focus in mentoring and resources available to assist with this. And so after the talk today, if you have any questions, are interested in any resources or upcoming mentoring trainings, interested in assistance with identifying members of a mentoring team, please let me know because we are happy to facilitate that. So without further delay, let me introduce our speaker today, Dr. Ian Paul. This is somewhat of a homecoming for him because he grew up right up the road in Amity, Pennsylvania. So he's not a mountaineer, but he is today. He is today. So a little bit of background on Dr. Paul. I basically caught him after a talk at a meeting and said, you have to come give a talk at West Virginia University, and he graciously agreed. He's a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior, Neurobiology and Anatomical Sciences, and Pharmacology at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, UMMC. He is an active academic scientist with an overall research focus in behavioral neuropharmacology and developmental programming of the brain and behavior. In 2006, he founded the first interdisciplinary graduate training program at UMMC, and it's the program in neuroscience, in which he served as director until July 2014. He now serves as Assistant Director of the Division of Neurobiology and Behavior Research in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior, where he created and directs the faculty mentoring program. This strategy forms the model for a program that will be implemented department-wide this year, and he's also the Education Director of the Center for Developmental Disorders Research. His training was at UNC at Chapel Hill and the Lab of Neuroscience at the National Institutes of Health. He was recruited to the University of Mississippi in 1993, has published over 80 peer-reviewed manuscripts, and is funded by the NIH and Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The list really goes on, and he has extensive mentoring experience within the sciences and medical education. And to prove that no good deed goes unpunished, last autumn he was promoted to Director of Medical Student Education in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior, providing didactic education in psychiatry in the M1 and M2 years, as well as clinical clerkships in the M3 and M4 years. So Dr. Paul, I'm going to welcome you up and thank you for being here.
Works best. Great. Okey-doke. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Julie. Brain is not working well. Too many meetings. Give me just a sec here. All right. Well, I am very happy to be here, and I've always enjoyed West Virginia, and it's been a long time since I've been able to be back here. As was mentioned, the topic today is mentoring, and specifically mentoring throughout an academic career. Now, before we get too far along, I want to acknowledge a number of sources. These are some terrific resources for information, some of which appears in the subsequent slides. The thing about, everybody talks about mentoring, but as it's sort of like Superman. Everyone talks about mentoring, but nobody can really define what it is. And that's unfortunate because there are some good definitions, and we'll talk about that. But the point of mentoring is that it leads to productive choices during a career, okay? And the idea is to learn either from someone senior to you or your peers, sometimes your students. Mentors come in all different sizes, and you need them at every stage of your career. So let's talk about what I'm going to do today. All right. We'll start off by figuring out what mentoring actually is. We'll talk about why academic career mentoring is important. We'll talk about the difference between formal and informal mentoring. And we'll talk about the principles of formal mentoring, which is what I'm advocating here, styles, cycles, skills, and pitfalls. Okay? So, what's so important about faculty development? Why should we care? Well, let's take a look at a simple figure. This is drawn from UMMC, probably comparable or higher here. Recruitment and startup costs are about $500,000. Salary and fringe for 7 years, $630,000. Indirect costs, so you're talking about $1.2 million. And that's just for early career faculty. The costs go up as the faculty get more senior. Plus, you're talking about all that lost productivity, grants and publications that an unsuccessful faculty member is not able to produce, which builds or would have built the institution and department's reputation. So does mentoring work at all? Is there any evidence for this, or is this just my harebrained opinion? Well, partly the latter, but there is actually evidence. And the evidence is interesting because not only does it produce improved development, guidance, career choices, but it builds higher retention and recruitment. But in spite of that, 50% of junior faculty, less than 50%, have a formal mentor. Now, when I poll faculty at UMMC and I say, do you have a mentor? They say, oh yeah, so-and-so. Okay. When do you meet? Now and then. Well, how's that defined? Now and then, or more then than now? And usually you find out that it varies, but it's usually more then than now. Mentoring's not new. Its first description comes from the Odyssey. Odysseus decides to gallop off across the Aegean Sea, and he places his old friend Mentor in charge of his son Telemachus while he goes off and destroys Troy. And it's defined as one who imparts wisdom to, shares knowledge with someone less experienced. As I say, don't assume from that that means senior teaching junior. It can mean peer teaching peer. It can mean junior teaching senior. It comes in lots of different forms. Because a mentor is an individual who has some specific expertise that guides, trains, and promotes the mentee's career development. And there are three basic types of mentoring functions, at least in academia. There is career mentoring, okay? Navigating the steps that get you to promotion and tenure and get you grant funding, get you publications, get you on important study sections, this sort of thing. Research and psychosocial, and we'll talk about each of these in turn. So as I say, career mentoring is learning the ropes. And interestingly enough, it can hold true at any stage in career. If you're a senior faculty member and you get recruited to somewhere else, somebody has to tell you how the system works at that new institution. It's not like, well, they do give you a manual, and it's usually about yay thick, and nobody ever reads it any more than they read the end user license agreement from Apple. Primarily, career mentoring involves coaching, providing the mentee with assignments that will challenge them, increase their exposure and visibility, and very importantly, the career mentor is the mentee's advocate and sometimes protector. You know, when someone comes on, as I mentioned to one of the people I talked to today, one of the postdocs, pointed out that if you're in any intelligence at all, people are going to want chunks of your time. And one of the big functions of a career mentor is to help you or help the mentee deflect the requests for time that aren't going to help them and point out to them the ones that will. Research mentoring is the one that most of us are most familiar with. And when people talk about mentoring in an academic setting, this is usually what they're thinking about, because this is the obvious stuff. Guiding and advising on research projects, identifying collaborators, what are the resources in the institution, how do you develop a grant proposal, how do you write it, giving the mentee feedback, and of course advising the mentee on manuscript submissions. Now, the last function is psychosocial. And I come from a department of psychiatry, and I can tell you that whenever I talk about psychosocial mentoring, most non-behavioral scientists start to cringe. It's like, ooh, that's really touchy-feely. No, it's not. Because really, all it is role modeling, acceptance and confirmation of membership in a community of practice. Anybody know what a community of practice is? You're in one, okay? A community of practice is defined as a group that shares a common set of values, and most of us are members of multiple communities of practice. For example, I am a member of the research scientist community of practice. I am a member of the educator community of practice. I am a member of the parent community of practice. And one of the psychosocial jobs is helping mentees balance their membership in all these different communities of practice, because all of these communities of practice make demands. Counseling, work-life balance. I spent 5 months counseling one of my remote trainees at UC Davis who was dealing with one of the most toxic academic environments I'd ever heard of, okay? And finally, just providing a sympathetic ear, a friend, okay? Now, you need a lot of competencies to be successful in academia, especially in the 21st century. I'm not going to recite them all off to you. You probably know them. But as I was telling the postdocs earlier, and I think all of the members of my generation of scientists will concur on this, the prevailing tradition in academics has a peculiar mythology. And that is that when they hand you the diploma in your specialty, whether it's a Ph.D., an M.D., DDS, somehow the heavens open up, the angels come down, and they impart to you knowledge of administration, management, skills in interpersonal job skills, you name it, okay? Well, they don't. It doesn't happen that way. You don't automatically learn communication skills. You try in training. You certainly don't learn management and leadership skills in most training situations, or at least not much. And various competencies often need to be beefed up, okay? Now, typically, the literature defines about 4 career zones that can occur at any stage, okay? Now, the ideal zone is where the individual is stretching their abilities, stretching their talents. There's the comfort zone, and that's nice. We all get into it for a while. It's good to be in the comfort zone for a while. You're just tooling along, doing what you do, getting the credit for it. The problem is that the step from comfort to dead, or comfort to panic, which is often accompanies this transition, is really easy to make at any stage of the career. So what do I mean when I talk about formal mentoring versus informal? Okay. The dude talking to Sam Elliott here, that's not informal mentoring. Nor is it 2 gentlemen in tuxedos. So what do I really mean? Okay, informal mentoring does not have specified goals. It has outcomes that are typically not terrifically clear. There's a self-selection process, you know. The trainee picks a lab in which to do their dissertation, or to do their postdoctoral training, or to do their, or start their career. There's usually no specific training of the mentors. The benefits, particularly to both the trainee and the mentor, are indirect, and there's no oversight. So formal mentoring, on the other hand, has very specific goals. It has measurable outcomes. Mentor-trainee pairings are strategically made, okay? And usually there are multiple pairings. Mentors get specific training. Even people who think they know how to mentor. That can be tricky, but you need to do it. Formal mentoring provides very clear benefits to both the organization and the mentee. We talked about some of I talked about some of the financial benefits and the career benefits. And part of the way you make sure that happens is by oversight with very specific markers, very specific milestones. So, how do you do this? Okay, formal mentoring has a defined duration of program. It's typically a minimum of 12 months. Often, it's a good idea to make it a 12-month renewable agreement. It works best, this kind of formal mentoring works best with early career rather than mid or later career mentoring, but it can work with either of those. The participation by both the mentor and mentee is voluntary. Now, voluntary. Well, I'm a behavioral neuroscientist by training. Voluntary can involve a lot of factors. Carrots and sticks are often used to generate voluntary actions. There has to be thoughtful matching using the input from the mentee. Okay, what are their research interests? What are their career goals? Demographics, experiences. Few basic principles of mentoring. The mentee drives the agenda, not the mentor. Okay, the engagement for both is voluntary. Okay, the relationship is confidential. The mentoring is not directive. Okay, it's not the mentor telling the mentee, go do X. It's the mentor saying, maybe you should think about doing X. The relationship is based on trust and mutual respect. The mentoring is designed to empower the mentee to take responsibility for learning and career development. And there are no relational obligations beyond the developmental intent. Okay, so you're not saying in this initial contact, you're going to be my mentor, I'm going to be your mentee for the next 20 years. That may happen. It has happened with me, probably happened with some of you, but it's not required. And that's one of the ways you encourage potential mentors to join your formal mentoring program, because they know they're not making an open-ended commitment. Mentors are not therapists, okay? And mentees need to understand that right from the outset. Now, what else do you need to do a good job as a mentor? Well, I say this so often to my students that they get sick of it, but if you don't know where you're going, there's a really good chance you're going to end up somewhere else. And there's an even better chance that you're not going to like the place you've arrived at. So, how do you get around that? You use individual development plans. Now, contrary to academic belief, IDPs are not new. The business industry has been using them for over 20 years. Okay, we just got alerted to it a few years ago. But they form a key component of formal mentoring. They identify professional development needs and career goals. Okay, the trainee and the mentor fill out together and identify areas of strength, areas of weakness. They identify where the person wants to be. As I was telling the postdoc group this morning, 10 years out, where do you want to be? Okay, and what do we need to do in the next year to help you get there? It helps them set milestones. Okay, milestones are really important, and they're important for two reasons. One is milestones mean accountability, okay? But the second reason is milestones are reinforcing for both the mentor and the mentee. You hit a milestone, hey, cheer, you made a success. It facilitates communication between the mentee and the mentor. Again, somebody asked me one time, how do I establish better communication with my mentor? Well, an IDP is one really good way to do it, because you sit down together, and when things start to go off track, whether it's the mentee going off track or the mentor going off track, there's something to refer to. It provides a framework for feedback and evaluation. Now, I've given you a bunch of websites here For people beyond the graduate student stage, this is probably the best one, the University of Minnesota's IDP. So what do you do? How do you make one? Well, starts with the mentee. You do a self-assessment. You think about and look over your career opportunities, and you write a plan that matches your skills and strengths with your career choices, and you implement the plan, revising as necessary. It's not a map carved in stone, okay? IDPs can change over time and often do. The mentor then becomes familiar with the available opportunities, discusses them with the mentee, reviews the IDP, and helps revise. I'll tell you something that I've found when I go over IDPs with trainees. In the self-assessment, academics are really, really tough on themselves. I mean, I have gone over, the self-assessment on a typical IDP covers about 20 or 30 items. And, I'll see students or trainees at any stage, and they're always, I can't write, I can't speak, I can't, I don't know anything about the lab. Yes, you do, and that's a great place for the mentor to start. It's very reinforcing. It's very reaffirming for your mentor to say, you're better than you think you are, Here's where you're better than you think you are. And how do I know? Because I've studied a bit of you. I've studied your CV. I've talked to you. I've talked to other people about you, okay? So I have a pretty good picture of you. This is very, very important. Regular review, okay? IDPs are not something you revisit every 12 months. IDPs are something you revisit every month at minimum, okay? Now, a couple of critical differences here between informal mentoring and formal mentoring. First off, the mentoring program is monitored externally on a regular basis, okay? Progress is tracked with specific milestones, and dysfunctional relationships are ended quickly and replaced. And that's where people like me come in, okay? I meet with the mentor and mentee individually typically every 6 months. And I see, are they making progress? Have they hit their milestones? Are either of them reporting problems? And if they are, we deal with it right then and there. The program is evaluated, okay? That means that there's an evaluation by both the mentors and the mentees. That is to say, the mentor sends me an evaluation of the mentee sends me an evaluation of the mentor, okay? Evaluation is predetermined by benchmarks like grant success and faculty retention. Yes? Well, I know what you're saying. Well, there has to be some way of dealing with relationships that don't work. My conversations normally are of this nature. They're typically on either side 10 or 15 minutes. How's your relationship with your mentee going? Good or not good? How's your relationship with your mentor going? Good or not good? Have you reached the milestones you set? Yes, no. That's it. So I don't go into very specific details, okay? if one or the other says that there's something wrong with the relationship, my typical tactic is to gently probe a little bit to try to find out what's wrong and see if it's fixable, okay? But you're right, it is it's a delicate balance, because you do want that trust, but you also, it's like Ronnie Reagan, trust and verify, I'm the guy that verifies and makes sure that things are going along. Now, mentoring has a cycle, and it starts by building rapport, let's break it into bigger chunks first. First, you clarify the expectations, then you produce, then you mature and you close, okay? So, first step, you got to build rapport. You have to have that mutual trust and comfort. Contracting and ground rules, okay? There has to be an exploration in both directions of what each person expects from the other, okay? And it's really good to do this up front. For those of you that are experienced, think about it this way. How many author order battles have you ever had, okay? What's the simplest way of avoiding them? You decide up front who's going to be first, who's going to be last, who's going to take the middle, pickle in the middle position, and that avoids usually major arguments. Well, the same is true here. If a mentor is expecting the mentee to wash her car on a regular basis, and the mentee says, I don't really think that's a good idea, that's something you can get out of the way right in front. Likewise, if the mentee thinks that the mentor should write half their papers for them, that's something that needs to be corrected. You have to have specific milestones. You have to know where you're going. You have to make progress, and the way you find out is by reviewing and realizing that there's a lot of experimentation here. There's a lot of reevaluation. There's a lot of adjustment. Finally, we get to the stage of maturation where it's a more mutual relationship with a more bidirectional feedback, and hopefully resulting in increased self-reliance by the mentee. At the closure, the formal relationship ends, but an informal one may continue, okay? And that's why, particularly for early career faculty, I talk about a one-year renewable mentoring contract. Some people get all the mentoring they need in 1 year. Some people need more. Some mentors can mentor for 2 years or 3 years. Some can only mentor for 1, okay? So this is a way of making sure that nobody gets stuck in a situation they desperately want to get out of. Okay, how do you start with it? It's all about communication, and this is one of my favorite quotes in the world. George Bernard Shaw: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Active listening and mindfulness. Now, I know, these are soft and squishy psychology terms, and hard scientists hate to hear them, but they're real, and they play a major part in establishing a relationship. The first step is making sure that there's enough time, okay? You don't say, come talk to me between classes, or come talk to me between patients. You say, let's get together for an hour on Friday at this time. all of the focus for both the mentor and the mentee should be on the conversation at hand. It's a good thing for the mentor to remind the mentee of that at the beginning. Any problems you have outside of your career, put them aside for the next hour. I'll put mine aside for the next hour. We're going to focus on you and your career. Echoing is a really useful tool because echoing does two things. It makes the person you're talking to realize that you have actually listened to them, okay? It also gives them a chance when you've misheard them or misunderstood them for them to correct things, okay? So it's a great tool. You know, how does echoing work? Dr. Paul, I want to establish a career in academic psychiatry. Okay, so as I understand you, you want to begin a career in psychiatry in an academic setting, okay? Seems like a trivial thing, but it's a really good way of avoiding miscommunication. Pay attention to what's going on in that moment, okay? You know, even though we're not all behaviorists, we all know how to read body language. We all know how to read tone. Focus on it. Be sure that you're looking for thoughts, feelings, and judgments, both of yourself and of the person you're talking to, that are on the periphery of consciousness, and be in that moment. Okay. Mentors need to learn a lot of different questioning styles in order to get to the heart of the matter, to get the mentee where they need to be. There needs to be challenging questions that change or cause the mentee to reevaluate values and assumptions. There have to be probing questions that create insight, that are assertive, that open new horizons. Testing questions, you know? Do you know what the limits are? Have you pulled things together? And confirmatory questions, you know? Making sure that the questions are confirming, building the values and beliefs that you both share. So, how do we get, pardon me. Okay, for mentors, first thing to remember, many mentees, most of us, don't like asking for help. One of the tricks I do in a mentoring relationship is at our first meeting, I pick out 3 times in my career when I have desperately needed help and times when I've avoided getting it and what happened, and times when I've sought it out and what happened. It helps make you more human to your mentee, and it helps let them know it's okay to talk. Be aware of your limits, okay? Nobody knows everything, okay? If a student comes to me and says, I want to pursue a career in the pharma industry, I know about this much about the pharma industry, but I know people in the pharma industry, and I can put my mentee in touch with those people, and they can get direct information. Be clear to yourself and to the mentee that the mentee is in charge of the pace. This is a hard one for a lot of mentors to get. We always think of mentoring as directing, and that's not what it is, okay? It's guidance, okay? It's, you know, maybe you should try this. perhaps this would work. Have you thought of this? Don't try to manage. And one thing that most mentees, and I noticed this earlier, one of the people I talked to said they felt really uncomfortable about talking to very senior people. Well, one of the things a good mentor can do is introduce you. One of my longtime collaborators and dear friends, Rick Lynn, used to have a tactic when he went to the Society for Neuroscience annual meetings. He would bring his students with him. He usually had 2 or 3, or a couple of students and a postdoc. And they would follow him like ducklings all the way around the poster sessions or what have you, because Rick knows everyone. I don't know of anybody he doesn't know. I haven't met one yet, or that doesn't know him. And the first thing he does, or did, was, here, let me introduce you to my graduate student, so-and-so. She's working on this really terrific project doing X. And here's my postdoc, whose name is Bill, and he's doing this other great thing, okay? It helps the mentee. It helps them bridge that gap, okay? But just repeating myself here, don't micromanage. Learn from your interactions, okay? What works with one mentee may work for another one. But remember, it sometimes doesn't. There are pitfalls, okay? Some mentees are over-dependent. Some mentees try to exploit the mentor's influence. Develop a mentee, don't use them. That's the other side of the coin. And remember that this relationship is going to change with time, okay? When I was a postdoc, I went from listening intently to everything Phil Skolnick said to coming into his office and saying, boss, this is what I think we should work on next, okay? It's a change in relationship. Keep in mind problems that are specific to cross-gender or ethnicity or socioeconomic status mentoring. I'm using the gender basis here. Most common form of mentoring is male and male, okay? And they're usually, in previous years, of the same ethnic melatonin challenged ethnicity. But this is changing. Most common so far is a male mentor with a female mentee. But as we get more females into higher levels of academics, we're starting to see these, female mentor and male mentee, and finally, female-female. Each of these different relationships carries some challenges, and don't dismiss them. Don't pretend that they don't exist. Keep the relationship professional. Be sensitive to other people's reactions and avoid any perception of impropriety, okay? Mentee. I see a bunch of you out here. You're looking for counsel and advice, not supervision, okay? Be careful of pairing with an overbearing mentor. Be careful of exploitation. And please, learn the difference between asking for help and advice and demanding favors. Everybody has multiple mentors throughout their career, okay? At the end of this session, you'll see a few of mine. Synthesize what you learn from all your sources and recognize the dynamics of your relationship. One thing that young faculty often fail to do is they get a kind of tunnel vision on the project in front of them and the resources directly available to them. And they lose track of all the resources that are around you. Make use of them. I mean, they're not there for no reason. As I say, one mentor usually can't help you with everything you need. And don't wait for the mentor to contact you. Reach out. If you need information, you know, if your regular monthly meeting is 2 weeks away, but you've just got somebody who's inquired about possibly hiring you, pick up the phone, type an email, get in touch with your mentor. You want to talk to them. And expect that the learning you're doing now is going to continue all through the rest of your life. You want SMART goals. Specific, highly specific. I mentioned sometime today or last night, fuzzing out, about a pediatrician that we're trying to mentor. And in our first meeting, she came up with her specific aims page. And this older faculty member from Texas in allergy and infectious disease read it over, looked up, said, "This is a great plan for the next 20 years of your career." The thing is, it was a big picture plan, which is great, but you need to be specific. You need to be measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, okay? You want to be able to identify when you've succeeded. You want to know that success is possible. It has to be relevant to what you're doing, and it has to have time limits, okay? Now, there can be all kinds of dysfunctional mentoring, and given the time, I'm not going to recite all of this, but the point to make here is that when this happens in a formal mentoring setting, you want to get together with the supervisor of the program and get things cleared up right away. Don't wait. Don't make things fester. We'll pass by this one. Mentoring beyond the early career involves different priorities. Early in your career, we've talked about what you're doing. You're learning the ropes, you're establishing a reputation. Middle career, you're starting to reflect, you're starting to transition. I've made at least 2 major career transitions since I started in academia. Retooling, course direction, course correction. By the time you get to senior, you're talking different issues again. Administrative issues, recruitment, career, thoughts of retirement, okay? All of these things. They require a different approach, okay? In mid-career mentoring, faculty at many stages can serve as mentors, both junior and senior. You know, if you came to the institution as an expert in X, and X is no longer the current tool of the trade, you may need to learn from a younger faculty member how to do it. Later career mentors tends to be more of a mutual mentoring, where you're talking about how to retool skills, what to do about leadership positions, this sort of thing. So, as I say, you know, the mentoring approaches change over the career. Mid-career, it's still focused, still with a formal plan, and typically one-to-one. Senior career, it tends to be peer-to-peer mentoring, okay? So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about transitions from small to big labs, from labs to teaching or administration, retooling, Learning new techniques, leadership, you're now having to take on more leadership responsibilities, so you need a bigger picture. In senior career, you're talking about leadership again. How do you pass the torch? You worked to build something for the past 30 years. Who's going to take it over? Give you an example. I have a dear friend who's created one of the best human psychiatric tissue banks in the world. It's got over 550 samples. He's getting to the point where he's thinking of retiring in 4 years. Who's going to take over that collection? Okay. All right. So here's some additional reading that's helpful for both sides. And here's an example of how mentoring works throughout your life. I've got, and this is a short list, I've got at least a dozen mentors. And all of my trainees have taught me something. So I want to thank you. And I appreciate your time and your patience. If you have any questions, I'd love to take the next 2 minutes or whatever is available to answer them. By the way, if anyone wants to contact me, that's how you can get in touch with me.